welcome to the Route Consultant weekly webinar for emergency medical services. If you've never been here before, never met us, my name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. All that means for all of you is that really what I'm here for and what these webinars are here for is for you to learn more about these new industries, to be able to ask any questions that you may have. And then as you're thinking about moving forward, finding the best ways to accelerate your journey into the industry. And like I said, if you are here live, you will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end of this webinar. So if there's anything that it's something that I talk about today or my co-host talks about today and that you have questions on, or anything about the industry as a whole, you are free to ask any of those questions. My only ask is that you put them in the Q&A at the bottom if you get the opportunity. I might miss them if you put them somewhere else, like the chat, or if you raise a hand. So ideally, you put them in the Q&A, but we'll get to those questions regardless. Now, like I said, if you haven't been here before, this is a series we've done where there's a bunch of different topics we've discussed and things that we've covered over the last few weeks. And so if you're looking for all of those, they are on our YouTube page. So we'll have all of the webinars we've ever done here. Those are always going to be free and posted on our YouTube, so you can go back and watch them. And this one and all of the future ones will be as well. So if you're trying to catch up, they're all there for you, and you can go and watch and sit and binge through all of them. But today, last week, if you were here last week, we focused on trucks. And in these logistics industries, really the two pieces of the equation are often the trucks and then the people. So this week, we're going to be focusing about the other side of that equation, the people, and really how do you find them and how do you keep them? So what we've done is we've brought Hans Fakir back on to talk through, recruiting and retention strategies from his years of experience in the space. And if you haven't met him, haven't seen his full background on a few of these, Hans both has been in this industry for a long time. He started his own business, grew it, and he's helped, countless others get into the space and build their own business. So we like to always have Hans on here to provide his experience instead of just hearing from me. So Hans, if you want to go ahead and jump on and go ahead and say hello to everybody, and then we'll get started.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and it's always good to have you, Hans.
Pleasure's all mine. I love it. I
Perfect.
love it,
So,
love it.
so like I kind of teed it up, we're talking about people today. And so I think, this being any kind of tangent to the medical industry, there's always an assumption that there's some level of requirement. So can you just talk about what does a driver have to really be qualified to be in this space?
Sure. Now, in all states, a driver is going to have to be at least a minimum of an EMTB, right? Emergency Medical Technician Basic. That's in every state across the country. During COVID, though, states were allowing people to become EMRs, and some states still hold that program. So an EMR is basically an emergency medical responder only. They can drive, they can't be in the back tending to the patient, but they can drive. So it gives owners the freedom of taking a quick class for maybe 2 to 3 weeks and being able to drive the ambulance. But at minimum, all your employees have to be at least an EMT.
Okay. All employees, even if they're not the drivers, all have to be EMTs?
No, no, not at all. Just the drivers. Anybody that's going to be on the ambulance has to be a certified EMT or EMR. And
Okay.
you want and what we do, we definitely can hire medics. If somebody's asking, can you hire medics? Yes, they're usually a lot higher qualified than what we're doing. So I usually don't hire medics unless they want to work for me and they just want to remove themselves from the day-to-day emergency calls and work for something, less stressful.
Got it. Now, can you talk a little more, so that EMT program, can you just talk a little bit about how long it takes and is it online? Do they have to be in person? What does that class kind of look like?
Now, there are some places that they do it online, but at every online course that I'm familiar with, you still have to go in to the classroom settings to do your practicals. So they want to see the real live CPR, that you know how to do CPR and BLS. Most classes for EMTBs are no longer than 3 months. But the great thing is it works perfectly for someone who has a 9 to 5 because most of the classes are only 2 days a week and they're usually at nights from like 5 to 9 or 6 to 9, 3 hours a day. Because a lot of the stuff that you're doing is going to be hands on. And the time that you're going to find that is going to really take a lot of your time during the classroom settings is when you have to be at a hospital or you have to do your ride time at a fire station or a hospital EMS. And that's usually the part where most of my mentees love, where they actually get to sit on the back of an ambulance and go to fire calls or emergency calls. Even though, again, Josh, that's not what we do. We are licensed to do that. But again, we're teaching people how to do the non-emergency side. And so you get that experience and you have to do that to get your EMT. But for the most part, again, it's usually a 3 month class for the EMT basic, 2 weeks for the EMR class. And I've checked around in different states and they kind of vary here and there, but you shouldn't see something no more than 3 months if you're trying to just get your basic.
Got it. And just a clarifying point, let's say somebody's buying one of these businesses that already has drivers. Is it required for them to get their EMT?
No, owners uh, do not need to be EMT certified. They don't need to be paramedics. They don't even need to have a medical degree, right? I've been successful helping people that know how to run businesses or willing to learn how to run businesses, right? And they take their strategies and they take their schemes and they implement it in the EMS business, right? Route Consultants is very familiar with this because we transport. You guys do a lot of transportation with the bread and the Amazon. We're just a little bit more, I wouldn't say important, but we're transporting people, right? But the concept is the same,
Yeah.
right? Knowing what best routes are, you got to have it. So the state's not looking at any owners to be EMTs, but just the people that are going to serve the patients. They have to be EMTs.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, and I think that's really helpful, in this whole recruiting conversation of also understanding as I'm getting to the space, as I'm thinking about myself as an employee, what do I have to have? Um,
Yes.
so I know a lot of people when they get into the space do start as kind of they're running their one truck themselves if they started kind of from the ground level. But as you're starting to make the decision to add an additional employee or to add a driver, so you're off the truck, when you did that for the first time, what was the thought process there? What did you had to relinquish control and allow somebody else to be the person who's talking to these patients and representing you in the marketplace. What kind of things went through your head in terms of the type of person that you were looking for?
I definitely paid attention to. Actually, that's a great question too. Okay, so um, I definitely was looking for someone with a strong background, right? With Georgia, there are a lot of EMS companies, so you can get employees that bounce around from company to company. But I was looking for someone who um, can provide stability, and I always would question my employees of what I would always ask them, what are their long-term goals? Right. And a lot of people want to grow within a company. So that was key. Anybody that wants to grow within my company, then I can hopefully put them in that category of a potential candidate for a lead EMT. But it's definitely someone who's a leader, someone who understands the importance of the documentation that we have to provide, right? So someone who's dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the PCRs, which for those of you not familiar, the PCRs are the patient care reports, because that's our bread and butter. That's how we get paid. And someone who can uh, is teachable. That was the biggest thing, right? Because everyone, Josh, if I opened up an ambulance company for you, I could show you everything, but you're going to implement Josh's way of doing things, right? And so you want to make sure that that person can adapt to the way that you want your company ran. We all have the same goals. We all want to transport people in a timely manner. We want to provide the best customer service, but there's going to be that certain element of accountability that you're going to add to it, that certain element of structure that you're going to add. So having a lead EMT or supervisor, however you want to, whatever you want to call it, can really adapt your goals and implement them and put them on paper and make sure that the team buys into your concept. That's the biggest thing. It's finding someone to buy into your goals and they can teach it to someone else. So they're teachable and they can, teach others.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you brought those people on, did you find that it was enough to identify those types of things in them? Did you find it was enough to just do a phone call? Was there anything else that you would do when you're evaluating a new hire?
We did a 3 step process, but again, it was when I started, of course, the information wasn't like it is today, right? I was just like, hey, Josh, are you an EMT? Good. I got a job for you. Let's go.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I check your EMT license. I check your driver's license. And because when I first started and now people are getting into this business, I mean, patients don't stop. So you could literally start with one company, and I know I'm gonna get to answer your question, but
Yeah.
you can start with one ambulance, Josh, and not think that you're going to get an abundance of patients. And next thing you know, a social worker takes a liking to you, and they send you 3 or 4 patients. So sometimes the vetting process of an EMT, at the beginning, you're like, oh, I have to really expedite this process, and I'm gonna get to know Josh as we go, right? And
Yeah.
we don't create a thorough enough application process, right? But now what I do is I do a 3-step process, and one is my initial intake form. So let's say I put an ad out on Indeed or Monster and somebody responds to that. So with that, we do a phone call and we ask certain questions on the initial intake, right? And at the end of the initial intake, after we discuss to them about what do we do, how much we get paid, and what the hours might pertain, we'll then ask them, are they interested in the job? So now we're leaving no stone unturned and we're making sure that we're setting expectations. And then once they come in and they say, yes, they're interested in the job, then actually we do our interview. And now that we do our interview, we're asking more in-depth questions. We've had a chance to check your references and we put you in real life scenarios. And once we get past the interview and they accept the job, then we do an orientation. Because now it's time for me to show my new employee how I like things to be done, what things we take lightly, what things, have wiggle room. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to build leaders so I don't have to spend as much time there if I don't need to. And
Yeah.
that's what that came with a lot of trial and error. Of course, at one point it was, hey, fill out an application, let me check your license, let's go. And now as well, let me check your driver's license, let me check your EMT credentials, and let me check a drug test. Like we are learning as we go, and we're putting more and more things in place, and we learn that employees gravitate towards structure.
Yeah.
And I lost a lot more employees when it was just a free fall. Like, come work for me, come work for me. And now I've been able to retain more employees by developing structure and having some accountability. So that's really the process that we do. We call it a 3-step application process, but it vets who really wants to do it. And we almost emulated the exact same process that I had to go through when I was a firefighter, right? You got
Yeah.
to do this application, then a written exam, then a physical, and then you got to sit in front of people, and then they do an interview. So it was like, but they knew that's how they would weed out the ones that just are fly by nighters. And that process I adopted and took it into my private ambulance, and it's working.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think there's plenty of people who have been guilty of just, I need bodies, what are the minimum that I need from these people to get them in the door? But you're so right that building a place that, one, they know what to expect and the culture continues to meet that expectation. They feel like they have a place where they can grow and learn, goes a long ways towards keeping them. Because yes, you can just get people through the door with the minimum, but you're right, that doesn't often mean that they stay around for a long time. And so those types of things you can, take on into your own business, as much of that as you can build from the beginning, the better, because it's really easy to get caught up in a revolving door and then you're just dealing with the same problem, because orientation
Oh,
and hiring is not free. There is
listen,
a cost to it.
I've had employees come to me and say, "You really do an orientation?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is a real company." We're just
Yeah.
taking what corporate America does and we're implementing it because we find out what's successful in corporate America. We're implementing it in our company. And
Yeah.
no matter how big our ambulance company grows or how small it is, we're still going to keep certain things in place. And orientation and a strict hiring process leads to less turnover.
Yeah, and you mentioned something too, when you have that those early steps that you like to set the right expectations. Are there any things that you found that it's really important that a new driver in this space, for you in particular or for this industry as a whole, really needs to understand early, or they're going to be upset that they didn't understand it later, or that just that you found is important to set those expectations early?
Flexibility. You have to be flexible. And so what I've learned um, is don't ever set a schedule for someone, even though you know that you want to keep everybody within that 12-hour block frame, right? So your first patient's at 4:30, your employee gets to work at 4, and usually you'll set the schedule. For anyone listening, do not do this. Do not set a schedule from 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. and leave no room to explain to them that you might go past 4 because your employees will hold you to that. So making sure that, and you might have a patient that needs to get transported or was late getting off of dialysis or surgery. And now that employee's calling you like, hey, you said I was getting off at 4, right? So setting those expectations of, yes, I have you on a 12-hour block, but the same way that there's going to be plenty of downtime, there might be time for you to stay past 4 o'clock. Are you comfortable with that? Because what happens a lot are employees will hold you to that because they have kids in daycare, soccer practice, and they're planning their day around what you tell them. So flexibility has been at the beginning my Achilles heel, and making sure that I communicate that at the very beginning and maybe even 2 or 3 times at the initial intake, at the interview, and at the orientation. And we want to make sure that you know that even though your schedule says 4 p.m., there's a good chance that you might have to stay after that. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I find you can get so much farther with someone, even if it's something they don't want to do, as long as they knew that it was a possibility, as opposed to if it's a surprise and they weren't expecting it. Oftentimes that's when it's a hard line and they're not going to do it, or they're going to be really unhappy. Or it's just like you said, sometimes people just, if they know that they're supposed to be done exactly at 4, then they always have something planned to do at 4:15. Like, there's something that they plan on doing right after work, picking up their kids,
Yeah.
exactly like that. But if they know
And
that there might be some wiggle room, then either it's their fault for planning something at 4:15, or
yeah.
it's kind of gotten used to it. And so that, I think that's really important from an expectation setting.
And I'm speaking from a personal standpoint. When I didn't have my own ambulance company, I worked for someone else, and they say, "Hey, you're getting off at 5." So I'm calling my wife like, "Hey, I'll still be able to pick up my son." And they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we got one more run for you." And I'm like, "Mm." So that's definitely coming from personal experience. Like set those expectations that there has to be flexibility in the schedule and make sure that your employee knows that so they know what they're signing up for and you
Oh,
don't have any pushback.
and it's not just like you're just trying to squeeze extra revenue. Like you've talked about in a bunch of other times, the relationships are what are so important in this space. So if you've got somebody who calls you and said, "Hey, I really need you to take this run, take this patient," you want to be able to say yes so that they know they can depend on you. That's huge, not just for, a little extra revenue today, but building that in the long run, building that brand and reputation. So as long as everybody kind of understands that we're all pulling in the same direction, then I think it goes a long way.
And what you just said, Josh, is really the key to this whole thing. Building relationships with your employees, um, it's gonna take you a lot further than people expect. Don't be an owner that comes in and comes out, barely shows their face, really shows no um, uh, true involvement with what's going on. You're there to build a culture, and the what you said really just made my mind go 1,000 places because that's so true. I've had it where social workers will call you at 4 o'clock and your employees are getting ready to get off and they're like, hey, this other ambulance company has not shown up yet. If you come take this patient, we'll give it to you. And if you don't have that rapport with your employees, they're going to say, no, I have things to do.
Yeah.
And you can't get mad at them.
Yeah.
But I always pride myself and I tell all my mentees, be an owner that people want to work for, not have to work for.
Hmm.
And that'll pay dividends.
Yeah, that's huge. Um, Now you mentioned it a couple of times, but where would you typically post these? Like, do you advertise job ads? Is it just word of mouth? And if you are advertising, is it, Indeed? Is there any special place you normally put those?
Yeah. So one of my biggest successes, I guess, in recruiting has been Indeed. Monster works pretty well. And honestly, in this day and age, creating any business owner that has an ambulance company, it's very important to create a social media presence because people are paying attention to that. And what are people on? 90% of the time their phones throughout the day. So you want to actually be able to post the culture. You want to post your employees training, even if they're having a good time. People will call and say, "Hey, are you guys hiring?" But I've used Indeed, Monster, Facebook. I've even my employees are the ones to suggest that I start using TikTok. So we're like, okay, we're gonna start a TikTok page, and we keep everything appropriate, of course, with HIPAA, no patients, but anything based on the employees building a culture, and people will gravitate to that because if they see that people love working for you, then they will call. And another thing that I do is, of course, the easiest place to find employees are in fire departments, right? They work 24 hours. When I was a firefighter, we worked 24 on and 48 off. So we really only work 2 to 3 days a week. We work 120 days out of the year. So we have all this extra time. I will tell you guys this, 99% of firefighters have a part-time job. We all do, right? I don't know one that doesn't. And so a lot of them, will work these ambulance companies because they know the situation. It's a good chance for them to get some downtime. In the past, you don't see a lot of firefighters lining up to go to ambulance companies that do 911 because they've just did a 24-hour shift. Maybe they just got, beat up with 911 calls. So they're looking for something a little bit less stressful. And so you can find a lot of employees at fire departments. Another place that I go to is, of course, technical schools. Any technical schools that has a group of potential employees that are about to graduate from an EMT program, you want to speak to that advisor and you want to be present a week before they graduate because they're all looking for jobs. And I will tell you guys this, that not only you won't be the only person there, fire departments will be there, hospitals will be there because they're going to go where the fishes are, right? You're going to go to the lake where the fishes are hot. So you're going to swim, you're going to fish at that lake. And that's where you can find a lot of your employees. Technical schools that teach EMT, they're right there for you. Indeed, Monster, fire departments, hospitals. There are EMTs that are just EMTs at hospitals that need part-time jobs. So those are like 4 or 5 of the places that I've been successful in finding employees. And then a lot of it, of course, is the social media as well.
Yeah. I think those are great because I mean, it makes perfect sense. We've used firefighters as part-time drivers in our FedEx business for the exact same reasons you mentioned, but it's even better if they've already got their EMT, like, they're already checking the only real box you need checked. So that's perfect
Yeah.
for this industry. So I think that's great insight.
There's 3 things you're going to get with a firefighter that you don't even have to vet. They're going to be an EMT, they're going to have a good driving record, and you probably don't have to do a drug test. So you're like,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Those are the ones and they know how to lift up a stretcher. So keep in mind, guys, also that when you do go to EMT school, I want you guys to pay attention to this. When you interview someone that's just gone to EMT school, there's a good chance that they have limited experience on an actual ambulance. So you want to make sure that they know how to properly lift a patient and lift a stretcher. You don't want to have anything, any liability. So I had to, again, everything I say is from personal experience. And employees would tell me, hey, I know I went to EMT school, but we had very limited experience in stretcher training. So what did I do, Josh? I added that as part of my orientation.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, so again, yeah, just a little side note.
Yeah. I think that's great because anything that you can take from Hans that it comes from his own personal pain points and things he's had to learn over the years and save you some months and pain of your own is perfect. So it's always what we're trying to do here.
Every
So
bit of pain has a lesson behind it, right?
yeah, that's right. Ideally, that's what we gotta if we can keep that attitude. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about kind of bringing the drivers on. Once they're on, is there anything that you would do on an ongoing basis to kind of monitor and see if they're actually performing their tasks well or doing their jobs well outside of actually being on the truck with them?
Yeah. So before I hired a supervisor or a lead EMT, I'm going to QC, what we call in the EMS world. QC is like quality control, or QA, quality assurance, everybody's PCRs. So I'm making sure that they're dotting their I's, they're crossing their T's, like making sure that their vitals are in place, making sure that the PCR is for the right patient, the right time, the right route, right? You want to make sure all those things are there. And then the PCRs that you seldomly have to go back and correct, you want to recognize those employees, right? You want to recognize the employees that are consistently showing up to not only work on time, but to the patients on time. Another thing that I did also was every truck has a tracking device. So I can see how fast an employee's going. I can see, how hard they hit the brakes. You know those tracking devices, and you can see where they're at and making sure that they're at where they're supposed to be. Again, sidebar, lesson learned, right? I didn't have that at the beginning. So if you have a patient if you have two patients that there's a 3 hour gap and one patient is and they're in close proximity, you could have an employee literally say, "Well, I have 3 hours. Let me go to the Mall of Georgia or whatever," and they're 30 miles away. So now, again, we implemented in our policy and procedures that you have to be 5 miles within the next patient, right? Because a lot of your employees are going to be people that are in nursing school or medic school, and they want to park the truck somewhere and use that as downtime. But to get back to what you're saying, I did a lot of that, and some of that, some people would say micromanaging, but it all led to our quarterly evaluations. And I can now have a track record of how fast you were driving. I can have a track record of how late you've been with patients, and I can have a track record of how thorough you are with your PCRs and all those things. When they know that they're gonna that you're gonna hold them accountable every 3 months, then that really works. Again, these employees gravitate towards structure, and you have to give them something to respect. And so that was one thing. And then the biggest thing that I realized that employees, I don't know if they really loved it, but it really made them step up to their thing is we had survey cards that had barcodes,
Hmm.
and when you transport a patient, you could have the patient leave real time, like a review. And a lot of times the employees urging the patient to put their name on there. So listen, I just was transported by Josh. He was a great, and I'm seeing this, and it gets posted on our Google. So it
Hmm.
serves two purposes. It helps me with the review process when I do their quarterly reviews, but it also helps us with marketing because the survey would go actually to our review Google site, and now people are looking at this and seeing the reviews coming from patients and social workers.
Yeah,
So that
that
was huge in keeping employees, accountable.
yeah, I think those are all great ideas because yeah, I mean, sure, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to micromanage anything about employees, but there's always, you gotta, like you said, there has to be some kind of structure. There has to be something that they're held accountable for so that everybody stays on the same page. And it's not necessarily, trying to see every little thing they do, but you want data so that you can have those conversations. And I think a quarterly review is perfect based on all
Yeah.
those data you're getting. Yeah. So,
And
oh yeah, did you have something?
I was gonna say, and there's so much, like the profit margin is there where you can start giving incentives when you do those quarterly raises, right? So there's just a lot of room for people to really create the kind of company they want. They're
Yeah.
not tied to like financial constraints or anything like that. It's really just you you get out of this company what you put in, and the company is your employees, right?
Yeah.
That's they're your liaisons, they're your problem solvers. They're gonna figure out the best routes for you. So they have to buy into everything that you. They have to buy into your vision, and
Yeah.
they have to know that you're going to be part of the boots on the ground as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of that buying into the vision. So, you've talked about how there may be like firefighters or different types of organizations trying to pull maybe from this same pool of potential employees. And there are other ambulance companies as well. So is there anything that you would kind of think through or talk about in terms of why they should work for you instead of one of those other options?
Besides me being a great person,
I mean, that's got to be the first reason. But besides that, yeah.
one thing that I did, of course, is I definitely tried to differentiate myself from everybody else. And what I realized was a lot of companies, and you guys will see this, they do not offer health insurance. So that was key to me retaining, especially a lot of my female employees that have kids and they wanted to go somewhere with health insurance so they could have for their kids. And the insurance is so cheap now, it's really not even going to cost you a lot to pay 50% like the employer pay, part of their health insurance. Right now, I'm currently paying like $70 a month for one employee.
Yeah.
That's really nothing when you look at the grand scheme of things and the money that these employees are bringing into the company, it's well worth it. So that really helped me keep employees for over 4 years. And that's kind of unheard of in this market, right? People are using the EMS, private EMS to, maybe 2 years while they're going through medical school or nursing school and they have time to study. So keeping employees for 3 to 4 years is, you know, amazing.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, honestly, 4 years is great in just about any industry at this point. So,
Yeah.
so I mean, that's great. Yeah, and so I hear you that not everybody's offering medical. were there any other benefits that you've ever like thought about and decided not to use that you've heard of others using in this space?
You know what? A lot of people do, or some people do. I've never done it, but I've actually got turned down by a couple of employees because I didn't have it. Some
Okay.
people actually invested in electric stretchers, and
Okay.
some
Yeah.
employees, I know it sounds minute, but I've actually got turned down by a couple of employees that would come to the interview and say, "Do you have electric stretchers?" And I would say no. And they're like, "Hey, we're going to stay where we're at." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" And because they want less wear and tear on their back, some of these patients are obese. And again, you are dealing with EMTs that vary, right? From sizes, you got young women, uh, strong firefighters. It really just varies. And so that has been one thing that I've always been intrigued on doing, but right now we have a pretty strong staff that doesn't complain about it. But I think I've heard nothing but good things from employees that work for companies that have it. They love it. It makes it so much easier to transport. And again, just like your truck can be a gravitational pull for employees to come to you, the stretchers can be, uses that. The equipment that you have actually can make or break an employee's decision if they want to work for you or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about vacation time? Is there any kind of standard vacation time you offer?
I did do that, but that was only for in-office staff.
Got it.
So
So
I did
drivers
do
don't expect it as much.
no, no, not at all. Because again, a lot of these drivers are working the 12-hour blocks.
Yeah.
So they're working Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So for them, it's almost like the fire department. If they took off on Friday, then they're off Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Now, would it be something that I'd be opposed to doing? No, definitely. If it's going to keep a really, really good employee, then
Mhm.
yes, I have done 1 week paid vacation for my full timers. We just didn't offer it to the part time.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it makes sense too. Any office employees obviously have a little bit, they have a different day, a different expectation on what's required of
yeah.
them. So their structure will look different too.
And we set the standard on everything because we really wanted to entice our part timers to be full timers. So everything was given to our full timers. Even when you come to our orientation, the full timers were given 2 uniforms, part timers were given one. Like it was just as simple as that. We want to show the disparity so that way we can urge you to that. Healthcare was only offered to the full timers. So we tried to do whatever we could, and it worked to get the part timers to cross over to the full time threshold.
Yeah. Yeah. That's perfect. So I think that's most of what we wanted to talk about today. So as you've heard us talking about recruiting in this space, you know, kind of part one is just knowing what types of skills they have to have, what types of requirements on the EMT side. But it's really, I think, positive and informative to hear from Hans on the fact that there is a driver pool that exists that already have those qualifications. It's just about looking in the right place, and you can bring people on who don't have it. You can have them go through that school, but knowing where to look and then how to bring them on, and then building that right structure and right culture to keep them for as long as possible, even as long as 4 years is huge. And so I think that's a kind of a great overview of what to expect from this industry. Do you have something right there to add, Hans, or are you good?
Yeah, I was gonna say one thing I don't want people to just do is stick with the paid firefighters because there are a lot of volunteer fire departments and they have really good qualified people that are looking to do something else as well. So going to volunteer fire stations can also benefit you in finding that right employee.
Yeah. So if anyone has any questions for Hans Rye, you can go ahead and put it in the Q&A. You'll have about 30 seconds because I don't see any right this second where I'm kind of finishing up. So if you're typing, type fast and I'll get to it. But if this is the first time that you've been on one of these or you're just kind of trying to learn about the space, we do have, like I said at the beginning, all of our other webinars that we've done over these last few weeks are online on our YouTube page. So you can see any of those previous ones, and this one will be up there too. We also have a one-on-one course and a few other courses that are coming online soon on our webpage at routeconsultant.com. And if you are looking to get into this space, either starting your own, or maybe you are trying to acquire one and you're just trying to work through how the operations work, there's ways that you can work with us to find and value those operations, but also working directly with Hans on building your organization, starting from the ground floor, and also continuing to be successful after you build one or acquire one. And so if you're looking for any help in any of those respects, reach out to our team directly, info routeconsultant.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of us, that email. So if you have any of those needs, any of those questions, you can always reach out to us. If not, and the link is in the chat as well. So other than that, Hans, it's always a pleasure to have you here. So thanks for being here another week.
Hey, I'm here for it. I'm here to help out as much as I can. And, yeah, I'm great.
Perfect. And for everybody who's on here, thanks so much for being here. And hopefully we will see you next week on another webinar. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Hans.